because this is how I'm going to develop the lesson. So understanding the 7 types of research gaps. And these gaps will be found when you engage with your literature review. So the objective here is to recognize the common research gap types, identify the research gaps, and write about the research gaps in what you're calling your literature review. I want to emphasize, and I won't be reading all this, but allow me to read this paragraph because it's very important. One of the most prevailing issues in the craft of research is developing a research agenda and building the research on the development of the research gap. Most research of any endeavor is chiefly attributed to the development of the research gap. This is a primary basis for the investigation of any problem, phenomenon, or scientific question. So given this accepted tenet of engagement in research, it is surprising in the research fraternity that we do not train researchers on how to systematically identify research gaps as a basis for their investigation. So when we tell our students, go and read the literature review, what are you telling them? Do they know that they're reading the literature review so that the gap that they're looking for will be amplified? That's the purpose of the literature review. So this continues to be a common problem with novice researchers. Literal theory and research has been developed on identifying research gaps as a basis for a line of inquiry. I would like Daystar to say this. When we are talking of a research problem, actually research problem, the research gap. That's what we are saying. There is a bedroom called the research gap. So you, from now henceforth, will be interested in the research gap. So when working with those doctoral students and even master students, this concept of addressing a gap in prior research, that means you are now reading research that has been done by other people, prior research, seems to be foreign to them. People just read literature review, but some even say, I have a problem, but they don't see that problem as a gap, because you must see it as a gap of some kind. Then you will bring the right articles to study for your literature to address or fill that gap. So the idea of finding gaps in the research has been troubling for most researchers, more particularly between, not maybe I'm using master's, doctoral too much, but even this one, our master students, both the masters and the doctorate students. So it is a problem. For a considerable period of time, there were no formal established framework for identifying or characterizing the research gaps. It appears that identifying research gaps is in the eye of the beholder. But there is no systematic way of conceptualizing and identifying your gap. One researcher's gap may be another researcher's non-gap. Most of this conflict with research gaps tends to touch what? No. So can you be able to argue that a gap is one of the things you're looking for, or it is not? It is still a struggle for most researchers, as I've seen, to identify and define gaps in their studies. And this chapter will introduce the 7 types of research gaps. So I want you to look at these gaps for a moment. Can you focus on what is here? Focus on what is here. And think about it. Focus on what is there and think about it. So there are 7 research gaps. There is a population gap. There is an empirical gap. There is a methodology gap. There is a knowledge gap. There is a theoretical gap. There is an evidence gap. And there's a practical knowledge gap. And these gaps are the most common. There could be others. So what I want to do this evening is, because one of the students asked me a good question and said, yes, but can you, in your presentation in the seminar, tell us how we will know, how will we categorize our gap as being methodological, empirical, practical knowledge, theoretical gap? And this is what I would like to attempt to do with you this evening. But I want you to see, before I get into it, I want you to see the rationale I am putting forward for the basis of any literature review. You'll be looking for literature review to define, to amplify, to characterize your gap. That's what literature review is all about. So I want to start off with one. Let us pick one type of research gap, and then we'll illustrate, and then I'll pose for questions, because I would like to hear a lot of questions coming to me about these gaps. So I would like to look at a very simple one. I want to stop sharing that Word document and pick a very simple one, a population gap. Let me see. Let me try to share. I have so many slides, so bear with me. I'm trying to get them off and on and try to pick the right gaps. Are we seeing that? Has it come through, Carol?
Yeah.
Yes. I want you to look at this. Remember, literature review is about searching around the gap so that you can get the literature to justify why that gap exists or to amplify, kuipiga msasa. And I want to give an example of a population gap in studies related to policy analysis, educational leadership, social entrepreneurship, and financial management. Look at this. Let's start with the first one, policy analysis study. The topic is the effectiveness of healthcare policies in reducing infant mortality rates. If you're a good student in my class of research methods, once you see if the effectiveness of healthcare policies in reducing infant mortality rates, you know that this is a population gap, because we are talking about a population, a demographic of infants. That's very important. So this is just a hypothetical summary. This study evaluated the impact of various healthcare policies on reducing infant mortality rates using national health data and policy analysis from several developed countries. I want you to see why this gap relates to a population gap. And these are the infants. And this, of course, it is on policies. Now look at the population gap. A population gap, for example, can be this: underrepresented regions. The study focused primarily on developed countries in North America. This is an article I'm reading, and Europe. Neglecting regions in developing countries where infant mortality rates are higher and healthcare challenges are different. If nothing else, convince yourself that this gap sits in the domain of a population gap. You can have rural versus urban disparities. The research did not account for differences between rural and urban populations within the countries studied, despite significant disparities in healthcare access and outcomes. Remember, these are articles you are reading, and you are summarizing what you have found from that article, and you are saying, this is the population gap. I want all of us, and please allow me to go to this so that I can highlight something. Underrepresented regions. When you see regions, this is neglecting regions in developing countries. When you see that, you already know that this has something to do with populations. And then there is infant mortality rates. Again, that is a demographic. That's a demographic. Look at rural and urban disparities. The research did not account for differences between rural and urban populations. So obviously the gap you are chasing here relates to population. And what I want you to do when you are doing your literature review, suppose you are doing your research is in policy analysis, you must first of all tell us what the study says, then summarize what the study was all about, and then give us the gaps that you would like to tackle. Now, let me illustrate a gap here. So we are saying future research should include a broader range of countries, particularly from developing regions, to provide a more comprehensive global perspective. Or additionally, examining the impact of healthcare policies in both rural and urban settings within each country would offer insights into regional disparities and targeted policy interventions. So today in Kenya, we are grappling with the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. That is a population gap study in one aspect. It could also be a budget. It could also be evidence, an evidence study where you're giving evidence to show that Kiambu has 1 million people and Samburu has 230,000. But it is a population gap. Allow me to go through them, then I'll pause for some questions and some points to raise. Let us look at educational leadership. So I've used policy analysis. I've shown you a population gap. Look at this one. Educational leadership, the study, the impact of principal leadership styles on student achievement in urban schools. Obviously, this quickly tells me we are dealing with a population gap type of study. The summary, when I'll have read this article, the research examined how different principal leadership styles affect student achievement in urban public schools using standardized test scores and teacher surveys. So how does the leadership style affect upon achievement, academic outcomes in urban public schools. So urban public schools are schools that me and you know, Ziwani Secondary, and all those other schools in those highly populated areas. So we are dealing with that population. We're not dealing with the population of Lenana, Kenya High, Nairobi School. No, we are dealing with this population. What are the population gaps? Neglect of rural and suburban schools. The study focused exclusively on urban schools, overlooking rural and suburban schools where leadership challenges and educational context may differ significantly. And then diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. The research did not adequately represent schools with varying socioeconomic backgrounds, potentially limiting the generalizability of the findings across different economic contexts. This is a population gap. And you should be able to illustrate the gap. We are saying future studies. You are now reading this article, and you are saying future studies should include a diverse range of schools, including rural and suburban school settings, to understand how leadership styles impact student achievement in different contexts. Or including schools from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds would also help identify unique challenges and effective leadership strategies across diverse environments. I want you to note, I want all of you to note why this is a population gap. Can we mute Carol? Can you mute all of us? Now, suppose you are in the School of Business and you're doing something on social entrepreneurship. Social enterprise models and their impact on community development, population. And then the study analyzed the impact of different social enterprise models on community development by examining case studies from urban communities, in developed or undeveloped countries, depending on the paper you are reading. Again, this is targeting a certain population. So what is the gap? Rural communities. The research focused primarily on urban communities, neglecting rural areas where social enterprises might face different challenges and opportunities. How about the Global South representation? The study included social entrepreneurship from developed countries with limited representation from the Global South, where social entrepreneurship can play a critical role in addressing local issues. I'm trying to say this. If you're just talking about the problem of your study, it is amorphous. You'll end up chasing too many other variables. But if you can do the literature and narrow down to a particular gap, then you'll be very succinct in your variables of your study and even the literature and even the methodology that you'd use. The illustration of the gap, future research should include social enterprises from rural areas to capture the unique dynamics and impacts of these communities, in these communities. Then expanding the scope to include social enterprises from the Global South would provide a more balanced understanding of how different models work in diverse socioeconomic and cultural contexts. Ladies and gentlemen, I have only looked at, I'm looking at population gaps from your various areas of study. Let us take financial management. The effectiveness of financial literacy programs for college students. Again, they are talking about a demographic. They are talking about a population, college students. So when you read the article, you do a summary. This research evaluated the effectiveness of financial literacy programs for college students by analyzing pre- and post-program surveys and financial behavior assessments at a major university. So you're not just talking about my problem is financial literacy, you know that this is a population program and you will be chasing a definite population, a definite sample in that population, and these are the college students. Look at the gaps, the population gap, diverse educational institutions. The study was conducted at a single major university, lacking representation from community colleges, vocational schools, and smaller universities which might have different student demographics and needs. Non-traditional students. The research focused on traditional college students, neglecting non-traditional students, such as adult learners, like the people online now, part-time students, and those with different life experiences. You see, you have found an area to study by being particular about the gap. So what are we saying to illustrate the gap? That future studies should include a variety of educational institutions to understand the effectiveness of financial literacy programs across different types of colleges and universities. Number two, including non-traditional students would provide insights into the specific needs and challenges faced by the diverse population, helping to tailor financial literacy programs accordingly. I am trying to emphasize population gaps. So what I'm saying here is this. What I'm saying here is this. And I want us to be very careful that in each of these examples, population gaps are identified and suggestions are provided for how future research could address these gaps to produce more inclusive and generalizable results. That is an example of a population gap. I want to pause for a minute, and if there's any reaction, if there's any question, then we will move on. And Carol, pick the hands for the class. Yes, Chris Wekesa.
Yes, Prof, thank you so much. I'm just wondering, are we supposed to give the illustrations and summary that you are giving in illustrating the type of the gap that one is doing in the research proposal, or it should come right from the problem?
No, what I'm doing here, Wekesa, I want you to appreciate, if you are a good researcher, you must decipher the gap and bring it down to being able to say what type of a gap is it. But how you're going to write the literature review, the overall chapter, I'm coming to that later. For now, I'm sensitizing you to tell you, you must be able to ask yourself, what am I looking for in this article? And by the way, this is not your research. These are articles you are reading and you are identifying the gaps. So when you read an article, you should be able to say, which is the research gap in this article, and be able to narrow down. Professor Wekesa? No, Wekesa?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you, Prof, for that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that one of the ways of identifying gaps is for a person reading to ask himself or herself, what is this writer saying? What has this writer not said?
Good.
Then that way, one would be able to zero down on a specific gap, or even be able to identify several gaps in one particular article. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that addition of looking at it. And we are saying, can we, our master's and PhD students, go deeper and in your reading the literature to bring out these gaps? Like Prof is saying, can you ask yourself, what has he said? What has he not said? And what he has not said, is it around population? Is it around methodology? Is it around evidence? And so on and so forth. Yes, Martin. Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Prof. Basically, what the students need to be encouraged to think about is that for them to come to a point to have an interest in an issue, it means that they have been disturbed by certain readings that they have, because they are not satisfied that an issue that bothers them has been dealt with in depth. So the gap, therefore, becomes that point at which they are not feeling satisfied. And they take an interest in it because they think that there should be more that should be said about that issue that then they should delve into. So that gap comes out of their curiosity, comes out of their interest, and comes out of their reading. And therefore, it forms their interest into that issue in order for them to bring in their own perspectives to it. Over.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Obadiah, then Elizabeth, then Helen, in that order.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof, for the opportunity. So far, we're enjoying the presentation. I have an observation based on a topic that you highlighted, impact of principal leadership styles on student achievement in urban schools. My question over this topic, how is it possible that a population gap can transpire to a geographical gap in this way? Assuming that this research has been conducted in Kenya, maybe in Nairobi, and there is a quest to do the same to conduct the same research in Tanzania. How do you differentiate now between the two? Is it still a population gap, or when this is being done in Tanzania, it can be looked at somehow a geographical gap? Thank you.
Yeah, it can be that. You know, population, geography, age, academic qualification, those are all demographics. And I want you to start asking yourself, what is it that I am chasing in this study? You know, somebody in this place might not even chase a population gap like urban schools. He could be chasing evidence around principal leadership, an evidence gap. Yeah. So, yes, depending on how you narrow it down and what you have actually identified as your gap. This study also can be on practical knowledge gap on student achievement. So this is why I want you to open up your mind. But maybe let's do one more example, Badia, then you'll be able to see it clearly. Please mute. Was it Helen or who was next?
Myself, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes, can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. From what I've gleaned, let me use the example of the effectiveness of financial literacy programs.
Yes.
From the suggestion, the population gaps of the study lacking representation from communities, colleges, vocational schools, and all that. I think other examples are the same. I believe that it's the necessity to expand the scope. Now, in this aspect, the expanding this scope and based on what I've learned from graduate research is that there's need for specificity, given the fact that there are risks of scope creep, you know, and then with the expansion of the scope, there's also complexity of the entire research, you know, resource challenges, depth and breadth, data collection and analysis. So how do you strike a balance between, you know, having this representative scope and also maintaining that specificity to ensure that you do not make your work very complex to an extent that you're not sure which knowledge gap you're filling or contributing to.
Yeah, and that's why in your literature review and also your scope in chapter 1, your delimitation in chapter 1, you will now be telling us exactly who are you targeting, and therefore, what is your population gap? And that's what it is. Research at master's and PhD level is all about. You must bring in all these considerations with your supervisors and then agree this is our area of focus. And that's where you concentrate your literature. And when you walk to chapter 3, that's where you bring out the population and the sample around which data will be collected. So that's good thinking. I like what you're saying. But that's why we need to expose you widely, and that you're not doing things, you're not just blindly writing literature review chapter without engaging with these thoughts. Yes, who was next? 2 participants.
Myself.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor. So if I may seek for clarification, you said as we go through the literature to identify or in search of the gap that you're trying to address, and as Professor Wekesa also mentioned, that you might come across to at least probably more than one gap. How do you go about that? Do you address one gap, or there's a possibility of addressing the gaps that you identify from your searches?
I think that's for me, that's the essence of research. That being judicious about the gap you want to study and whether it has real life implications. Because again, we are trying to encourage people to do research that has application to real problems. So that will depend between you and your supervisor as you go along around that literature. But I want to allow me just to move a little faster, and then you'll get a lot of the questions you're asking me, you'll get answers very soon. Let me stop sharing this and pick just one more example of a gap. I think let me pick an evidence gap. Let me pick an evidence gap. I'll use this as an example, the evidence gap, and then we will use it for discussion. Just a minute. I hope it will bring out a few things clearly. Look at this. Look at this, and this one I'll move very fast, but look at this. Evidence gaps, and most of you do this research. So these are examples illustrating evidence gaps in studies related to policy analysis, educational leadership, social entrepreneurship, financial management, and clinical psychology. Because I know I have some students in clinical psychology here. So look, policy analysis, the impact. We are looking, remember, this is evidence gaps. It's now not population. The impact of minimum wage increases on employment rates. This is evidence. We want to provide evidence that minimum wage is a function of employment rates. So this is now evidence. Now, the article I read, the study analyzed the effect of minimum wage increases on employment rates using economic data from several US states over a period of 5 years. You know, what are we doing? We want to know the effect of minimum wage increases on employment rates. So we want evidence. So that's our gap. Evidence gap. There is a causal inference. So the study reading this article primarily relied on correlational data without employing robust methods to establish causality between minimum wage increases and changes in employment rates. So you read this article and you say, my God, they are assuming causality. They are only using Pearson's R statistic. They're not doing regression analysis to know really whether there's a relationship. Then there is granular data. There was a lack of granular data such as industry-specific or demographic-specific employment effects, which could provide a more nuanced understanding of the impact. Or long-term effects. This is research focused on short-term effects, missing evidence on the long-term impact of minimum wage increases on employment and economic conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, most of your studies are chasing evidence gaps, but it is so amorphous. And just if I flip back here, if you just said my problem is to have to measure the impact of minimum wage on employment rates, you can see how far you'll be off target. Because there are these other factors, the causal influence, the granular data, the long-term effects. And that's why, particularly at PhD level, you must really narrow down to a very small pinpoint scope for your study. Then you can give us findings that would make a difference on this earth. Illustration of the gap. Future research should use methodologies such as difference in differences or instrumental variables to establish causality, the independent variables. So this person just used Pearson R, which just says there is a correlation. He didn't use methodologies. Let me say, he didn't use high-powered statistical indices to be able to establish causality. And most students have a problem. This one, establishing causality. Most of us assume that a correlation is a causal relationship. No, it isn't. So that will require more vigorous engagement with statistics. Collecting and analyzing more granular data across different industries and demographics would provide a detailed understanding of the impacts. Because you are giving an evidence gap, you are filling an evidence gap. Then additionally, extending the analysis to cover long-term effects would offer insights into sustained economic outcome. Again, you can't do a cross-sectional study, walk into a factory, take data, walk out, and you are telling us this is the evidence of the relationship between employment, employability rates, and wage increases. Look at educational leadership. I want to use this to show you an example of an evidence gap. The effectiveness of professional development programs for school principals. The effectiveness of professional development programs for school principals. What are you doing here? You want to give evidence, the effectiveness of professional development. What is the value of professional development for the effectiveness of school principals? So the research evaluated the effectiveness of professional development programs for school principals by analyzing program completion rates and subsequent school performance metrics. Can I caution you that if you are going to do an evidence, if you're going to fill an evidence gap, definitely you have to engage more rigor, qualitative rigor, quantitative rigor, and allow for validation, allow for triangulation so that the evidence is solid, is valid. So you see, the research evaluated the effectiveness of professional development programs. That was it. How effective is it? We have spent so much money for school principals by analyzing in terms of completion rates and subsequent school performance metrics. That is very important. So when I have a student I'm supervising and they are chasing an evidence gap, I have many questions with them. Otherwise, you end up with invalid results and the study will not hold. So summary, we'll find that, so the evidence gap, direct impact on leadership practices, the study lacked, look at this one, the study lacked direct evidence on how professional development programs specifically change principles of leadership practices in the school setting. So I hope you are noticing that this is a very demanding area, the evidence gaps. Because how do you show evidence on how professional development programs change principles of leadership practices? And you're looking at school performance and the wellness of the school. And then student outcomes. There was insufficient evidence linking professional development programs to student outcome, such as academic achievement and social-emotional well-being. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to sensitize you as you go into doing your proposals. That, I mean, doing that master's and PhD, you must understand which gap you're chasing, and you must be confident that you can actually provide material, provide methods, provide evidence that a difference or there's a relationship between, in this case, professional development and school leadership practices coming out. I see theses, and most of them, by the way, would be shredded because they never reach anywhere near measuring what they're supposed to measure. Comparative analysis. The research did not include a comparative analysis of different types of professional development programs, missing insights into which programs are most effective. And I'm hoping as we do this, you are beginning to feel challenged and to open up your mind if you're working in this area in education. Let's look at this, the illustration gap. Because of time, I won't go into it, but look at this. Future research should include qualitative methods, such as observations and interviews, to gather direct evidence on changes in leadership practices. Linking professional development programs to student outcomes through longitudinal studies could provide a clearer picture. And additionally, comparing different types of programs would help identify the most impactful approaches. Remember, these are articles you are reading. Hey, these are articles you are reading around your gap so that you can come up with your gap and do the literature review. And already when I see this, if you read this article, you can come out with a study that or embraces these things that were gaps in that study that you have read, and you chase them for your thesis in master's or PhD. Look at social entrepreneurship. The role of social enterprises in alleviating poverty. And we are looking at the evidence. The study explored how social enterprises contribute to poverty alleviation by analyzing case studies and impact reports from various social enterprises. So maybe this was a systematic literature review or a meta-analysis. Because you want to bring out the role of you want to bring out the value of social enterprises in alleviating poverty. Now look at this, the gaps. Quantitative impact measurement. The study relied heavily on qualitative case studies with limited quantitative evidence to measure the impact of social enterprises on poverty alleviation. Yes, this is an evidence gap. Comparison with other interventions. there was a lack of comparative evidence to show how social enterprises perform relative to other poverty alleviation interventions such as government programs or NGOs. I wish I was looking at your faces to see that you are seeing what you see on the surface. There is so much for your study. You can pick a very small aspect of your study and criticize it. You see, even this, by the way, I would have used this. I could also use this one. I could also use this as a methodological gap. See why. This, I can use it as a methodological gap and say this study was essentially qualitative. And now you want to do a mixed methods, both qualitative and quantitative, to measure the impact of social enterprise on poverty alleviation. Yes. Scalability and replicability. The research did not provide sufficient evidence on the scaling and replication of successful social enterprise models in different contexts. And so I'm hoping that the class is beginning to realize, my God, I must narrow my gap, and then I must read a lot of literature around that to address my topic and to sharpen the gap I'm chasing for my study. So look at this. Future research should incorporate quantitative methods. I love these ones, such as randomized controlled trials, RCTs, or quasi-experimental designs to measure the impact of social enterprises on poverty alleviation. Comparing the effectiveness of social enterprises with other interventions should offer valuable insights into their relative performance. So you're not just talking about social enterprises. How about CDF, which is a government enterprise? CDF, how about that one? How about bottom-up? How is it as an intervention? Additionally, examining the scalability and replicability of successful models would help understand their broader applicability. So can you begin to be convinced that anytime I read an article, I want to narrow down and know which is what type of my research gap? Now let's look at financial management, those of you in School of Business. The influence of financial education on investment decisions. How is financial education useful on investment decisions? So already you're seeing we want to provide evidence on the influence of financial education on investment decisions. The summary is that you know the summary of the article. You must tell us what it is all about. The research examined how financial education programs influence individual investment decisions by analyzing pre- and post-education survey data. So these are controls. Those who received it, those who did not receive it, how are they in terms of investment decisions? So behavioral changes. This study that I've read did not provide sufficient evidence on the long-term behavioral changes resulting from financial education, such as sustained improvement in investment decision-making. Diverse populations. There was limited evidence on how financial education impacts different demographic groups, such as varying age, income, and education levels. So you are actually, you have searched and now you're saying, this is my gap. By the way, this is my gap. And this is what I'm going to chase in my study. Practical outcomes. The research lacked evidence on practical financial outcomes, such as increased savings, reduced debt, or improved financial security beyond self-reported survey data. Are you seeing the value of intensive literature review around the topic that you have developed? You must do between 5 and 10 peer-reviewed articles and go to the books and go to case studies. Then your gap will come out. Then you'll strengthen your problem in chapter 1 that you've already written because of the literature review you'll have read. So illustration of the gap, future research should track participants over a longer period to assess sustained behavioral change, longitudinal study, including a diverse range of demographic groups, people from Kibera, people from Mudaiga, people from Viga, Majengo, and people from Kwale, different demographics. Collecting data on practical financial outcomes would offer a more comprehensive understanding of the effectiveness of financial education programs. Those of us who have done entrepreneurship, we know what this man, Mahmoud, in Bangladesh did. You need to read a lot about him and learn from them. So practical outcomes, the research lacked evidence on practical financial outcomes, such as increased savings, reduced debt, or improved financial security beyond self-reported data. So I would like us to know why we are doing this, why narrowing down to your gap will allow you to read less articles around that area, and you'll be able to bring out which is your gap. What is the methodology? What was the sampling? etc. Finally, an example for my students in clinical psychology, the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders. This is an article I picked out, CBT. And of course, there is RCBT, religion, cognitive behavioral therapy by pastors and so on, for anxiety or for mental wellness or mental illness. Now look here, the study evaluated the effectiveness of CBT for treating anxiety disorders by analyzing clinical trial data and patient self-reports. Evidence of the gap, long-term efficacy. The study focused on short-term treatment outcomes with limited evidence on the long-term efficacy and relapse rates of CBT for anxiety disorders. Those are the gaps. And where are you going to get these gaps? You must sit down and read articles around your area. Mechanisms for change. There was insufficient evidence on the underlying mechanisms through which CBT exerts its therapeutic effects, such as cognitive restructuring or behavioral activation. This you'll get from the literature review. Diverse populations, the research lacked evidence on the effectiveness of CBT across diverse populations, including different age groups, ethnicities, and comorbid conditions. Illustration of the gap. Future research should conduct long-term follow-up studies to assess the durability of CBT's effects and relapse rates. That's an area to study. Investigating the mechanisms for change through experimental or neuroimaging studies would enhance understanding of how CBT works. 3, including diverse populations in clinical trials should provide insights into the generalizability of CBT across different demographic groups and clinical presentations. Conclusions. In each of these examples, evidence gaps are identified and suggestions are provided for how future research could address these gaps to produce more comprehensive and robust findings. Comprehensive and robust findings. I want to pause for 5 minutes. Carol, Can you cause discussion with my students in psychology on this gap, evidence gap? Just 2 minutes.
All right. We have quite a number of faculty members here on, and I would like us to also support and engage. Let's hear how you are getting these gaps. We have Dr. Martin, Dr. Wanyonyi, Dr. Jared, Dr. Rogers, Dr. Sitati. We have Dr. Selfa from SECU, and others, Mary Mogute, Dr. Kowor. Students can actually, you know, if you have any questions, can you raise them so that also they can, like, for example, in the psychology department, do you have anybody who has a problem in identifying gaps here? But you can also add the other.
And remember, this is just evidence gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would like, I just want students to convince me or to tell me, Prof, I think there is something we must search for when we are reading our literature. We must ask ourselves, which is the gap, or which are the gaps, as Prof. Wekesa indicated, in this literature. And when we are now going to show you how to construct the chapter, the literature review chapter, these are the things that must be brought to the fore. You must have them. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, there was someone who asked, Dr. Kaur says that's a good clarification of population evidence gaps. But there was someone who said, what if you get more than one gap? And I thought that, you know, what Prof is saying is that as you read articles, not every article is going to expose the same gap as the other article, but they all contribute to what you're talking about. So it is possible to get more than one gap in various, but then that is exactly why your study needs to happen, so that it can address and you know, fill those kind of gaps. So the question was whether it is only that one must get one gap in, or is it that there could be several gaps? And if there are several gaps,
yeah, there are several gaps, but I really want my students to ask themselves, you know, we have agreed that for our university and the world today, they are looking for solutions to problems. So whichever gap you come up with, please make sure that it will have practical application. Othello, your hand is up. Othello?
Prof. Yes, my question is partly has been discussed. Our last contributor asked that question about overlapping gaps in your study when you're doing your literature review. But I would like you to kindly distinguish practical knowledge gap from knowledge gap. I would like you to look at that and elaborate on knowledge gap and practical knowledge gap, please.
That's fine. Let me show you an example, and I'm only going to use one, area to illustrate that. Because of time, I'm not going to go through all the areas. Let me give you an example of a knowledge gap. A knowledge gap. Let me get this knowledge gap. Well, actually, we shouldn't rush. If people have concerns, we'll go through them. I'd hoped I'd finish writing how to write chapter 2, the framework, but that's not our intention. So we'll take time. Look at this. So I'm going to pick a knowledge gap in financial management. Financial management. So let me run quickly. financial management. A knowledge gap, the role of financial literacy in household wealth accumulation. This is an article I looked at. The role of financial literacy in household wealth accumulation. And remember, this is a knowledge gap. And I want you to be with me. Let's go back. Yeah, this is a knowledge gap. Unfortunately, I didn't label my slides, but we'll get it there. So, So, financial. Look at this. The research examined the relationship between financial literacy and household wealth accumulation by analyzing survey data on financial knowledge and asset holdings. Note, analyzing data on financial knowledge and asset holdings. So if there is a knowledge gap, it will have an impact on household wealth accumulation. So look at this. The gaps, behavioral insights. The study did not explore the behavioral aspects of financial decision-making, such as attitudes, biases, and habits that influence how financial literacy translates into wealth accumulation. So we did not explore behavioral aspects of financial decision-making, attitudes, biases, habits that influence how this. So because you didn't have this knowledge, you can't tell me that there is a correlation or there's a relationship between financial literacy and wealth accumulation. And then intergenerational effects. There was limited examination of how financial literacy impacts wealth accumulation across generations, missing insights into long-term sorry, I pushed it too far. Sorry about that. So intergenerational effects. There was limited examination of how financial literacy impacts wealth accumulation across generations, missing insights into long-term family financial health and stability. I want you to see why this is a knowledge gap. Because if you don't have it, if you don't have that knowledge, then you cannot relate to the topic. Intergenerational effects. People, not just of my generation and even the previous decade, there's no way you would come out of university, Kenyatta, Nairobi, Egerton, or whatever, and you start working, and after 6 months, you walk into a bank, Standard Bank or KCB in Kakamega, and you get a loan and you buy a car. You know, that was out of question. I'm talking about financial decision-making, such as attitudes, biases, and habits. It was out of, in fact, people tell you, where are you going to park that car? Unanunua gari saa hizi. The first thing when we started working, me and people in that cohort, was to save in the corporate society. And then save and get a loan and buy your first piece of land. And of course, that translates into wealth accumulation. But today, you start working. That's why you need to take, the study must explore the behavioral aspect. You start working, and the bank only wants a payslip. And then after 12 months, you have bought a car. But that car is on loan. You are buying a car on people's money. You have not saved. You see, the cooperative put us into a situation where we had to save. And so it became a basis in your life. But now people are starting life on loans. And by the way, how many loans will you get? You know you're going to work for 30 years, huh? And the repayment of a loan is usually 5 years, thereabout. So 30 divided by 5 in your lifetime. So if you start with a loan, how will you get into family financial health and stability? It never works. So that's the gap. Now, education interventions. The research did not investigate the effectiveness of different financial education interventions in improving financial literacy and subsequent wealth accumulation, missing a practical dimension of how to enhance financial literacy. So that is an example of a knowledge gap. What is the illustration of a gap? Future research should incorporate behavioral insights to understand the psychological and behavioral factors that influence financial decision-making and wealth accumulation. And this is very interesting. That's why today people advocate for multidisciplinary studies. So should incorporate a behavioral insights into understanding or to understand the psychological and behavioral factors that influence financial decision-making. And then exploring intergenerational effects would provide a more comprehensive view of how financial literacy impacts family financial health over time. So that is, Othello, an example of a knowledge gap. Now, you asked me, and we have examples in those areas. We will not go into them now. But you asked me, how about a practical knowledge gap? So let me stop sharing this and try to share a practical knowledge gap. Let me show you. And I don't know whether you should go to financial management, but we can go to practical knowledge gap. We can go to social entrepreneurship, just to illustrate because of time. So if I go to social entrepreneurship, leave education, let's go to social entrepreneurship. Scaling social enterprises, strategies and challenges. This is practical. Just by looking at the topic, Othello, scaling. So you are moving from pilot to scaling. So this is practical knowledge gap. And we can see the summary. The study explored the strategies and challenges involved in scaling social enterprises. So strategies and challenges involved in scaling, taking them into practice by analyzing case studies and interview data from successful social entrepreneurs. So now you're going to, from theory to practice, and you're going to look at case studies. You're going to look at Ambwere in Western Province, somebody who didn't go beyond class 2 and is a business magnate. And then you're also going to look at MP Shah Hospital, which is a social entity. You're also going to interview people to see how practical that has been. Look at the practical knowledge gaps. The study lacked detailed operational insights, such as logistical considerations, resource allocation, and day-to-day management practices, crucial for scaling social enterprises. Partnership models, there was insufficient discussion on forming and managing partnerships with other organizations, governments, communities, which are often critical for scaling. So that's now practical knowledge gaps. risk management. The research did not provide practical advice on risk management strategies for social entrepreneurs as they scale, such as managing financial risks, operational challenges, and stakeholder expectations. So, by the way, you are reading this article. Now, when you're going to construct your own literature review, you are already seeing areas where you're going to write about vis-a-vis the topic that you're dealing with. Illustration of the gap. Future research should include detailed operational insights and practical advice on the logistical and managerial aspects of scaling social enterprises. I just want you to convince yourself, this is practical knowledge gap. You are turning from theory to practice. Then providing examples of successful partnership models and strategies would help social entrepreneurs build and maintain effective collaborations. And then additionally, offering practical risk management strategies would help social enterprise navigate the challenges associated with scaling. So that's the difference between practical knowledge gap and the knowledge gap. And it's something you need to read about. It's something we will take time. You will take time with your supervisor. It can't be done. It can't be understood at once, but I want it to be recorded. It is recorded, as the hymn tells us, that you must understand the various different gaps. Then you'll have the deepened insight into the study that you're doing. And if we had time, we would look at theoretical gaps. I don't have time in those areas, and all the other gaps that I have listed as research gaps. Yes. Any addition, any query? We are pausing for 5 minutes on that. Two participants, the hands are raised up. Good. There is Othello and there's Abednego Kasim. Othello, then Abednego, or Abednego, I think is the only one. It's the only one raising.
Thank you for the explanation, Prof. My hand just remained there when I asked the question. Thank you.
Okay. Abednego?
Thank you very much, Professor. And clinical psychology.
Are you there?
Abednego?
Yes. Thank you, Professor.
Yes.
This is very eye-opening. I'm in clinical psychology.
Okay. Did you want to say anything more than that?
Abednego? All right, fine. And we wish you well as you begin your comprehensive exams tomorrow. Another person. I see another hand. Mbilu?
Oh, thank you, Professor. My name is Byron Mbilu. I'm in MM monitoring. So just a quick recap. Whatever I'm getting from this.
Mbilu, you want to move where there is some good network?
I can't get him very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for much. So just whatever I'm getting from the discourse, reading actually an article, you can actually get at the gap also from the finding, because the moment you get the key findings of a research article, you will see what actually the gaps that the study actually did not actually touch on. Immediately, something that is coming out from the population gap. I had a question earlier that I wasn't able to ask. I wanted to know something about reliability and validity. Does population gaps actually lead to a limitation in terms of research validity and reliability?
Yeah, I think validity and reliability, if, for example, you're doing a qualitative study, how you test validity and reliability is very different from somebody doing a quantitative study where they're using a very large population. So there we just employ statistical indices and they tell us the Cronbach alpha will tell us the validity, either construct validity of the tools that you're using or even the data itself. So yes, but you see that is a function of the design. That population will be a function of the design. If it's a qualitative study, you'll be using a very small population. So generalizability becomes difficult. And that's why it is a risk in terms of validity until you get to the experts in the area to look at your findings or your data to tell you, yes, this is okay, this is valid. So yes, it will have an impact, but maybe that will be better understood when I'm in chapter 3, where we cover validity and reliability. Ovita
Right.
Ken,
Yeah, Ovita, then Prof.
then Professor Moniwekesa.
Okay. Good afternoon, Prof. and everyone.
Good afternoon.
I hope you can hear me. Yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah, yesterday, was it? Yeah, there was a couple. We had a couple of thesis, proposal defenses and final defenses. So, I noticed that there was an argument, or rather, something that came up for qualitative. I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but again, it's something that has been bothering me. So one of the examiners said that it is not really necessary for qualitative research to have a conceptual framework. Instead, you should focus on having a strong theoretical framework. I don't know what you think about that. Again, another thing that came up, which of course raised some, eyebrows, was about when you're doing, or rather writing your proposal, there's no need for you to include an abstract. Because the assumption, or rather what came up was that abstract should come when you're done with your research. Now you are summarizing everything. Yeah. So probably if you can shed some light on that.
Okay, good questions. First of all, on the abstract, the only difference in the abstract in a proposal, you will not be telling us your findings, but surely you must tell us your objective, your variables, and the measures that you will take, and then indicate that this is a proposal. It's just good to have a small summary in an abstract, in a proposal. You will not have the findings. You will not have, if you're doing a statistical analysis, you won't have all the regression indices that will have come out, the R squared value or the ANOVA or the F statistic. And you'll also not tell us the usefulness of your findings yet, because you won't have yet gotten them. But there is an abstract that relates to what already exists in that proposal. An abstract is just a summary, a gist of what is in the document. So I wouldn't really put my energies there, because I'm already training you to write. You see, if you do an abstract in the proposal, you already know the almost half of it will remain the same. So that when you're coming to do your final, you're just adding in now the findings and the usefulness of those findings. So I wouldn't see that as a big problem. The other question was what? Just remind me. I wasn't writing.
The other question was about when you are doing a qualitative research. There was an argument that it's not a must for you to have a conceptual framework, as long as you have a strong theoretical framework.
You can't say that. That's a contradiction, a very serious one. How, first of all, you can't say you don't have to have a conceptual framework, but you must have a strong theoretical framework. The theoretical framework is the one that drips out the variables that you, as the researcher, now use to conceptualize the interplay of the variables in your study. In case of a qualitative study, we're not talking about variables. We're talking about the theses questions that you deal with. Let me advise that even with a qualitative study, you will be at peace with yourself if you know the key terms, call them constructs, that are causing the interplay in your study. Many people sometimes, long time used to argue you don't need a theoretical framework in a qualitative study. There are people who argue that way. But the truth is this: you must have some anchoring literature. So I was supervising a student in Moi who did a thesis on witchcraft in Kisii. Very interesting thesis. She's now a lecturer at Kisii University. And we had to do a lot of literature about not witchcraft, night running. Night running. We had to do a lot of literature and found many communities across the world who do night running. And then now we came to our space and we had to do purposive sampling, snowballing, getting to one night runner to tell us who they normally meet. But we had this anchoring literature. Yeah, so you will not have a theoretical framework, but you'll have theoretical underpinnings that now form as your beacons in your qualitative study. So let's be very careful not to committenize our thinking as if we are in prison. Prof, morning.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Just to respond to two questions. One, by my namesake, I'm excited by people who share a name with me. My namesake asks, what are the tenets of knowledge gaps? And then Kimi Sanya asks, what happens if I identify several gaps? Now, in terms of tenets of knowledge gap, let's try to keep it simple. All that is being said, and we are saying, is that by the time you are writing the literature review, you would have identified your statement of the problem, you have your objectives. Now, using your objectives, then you proceed to do your literature review. So then, because you have a task to achieve something through the objectives, you will be looking at the literature review with the lenses of the objective you want to achieve. What has this researcher said? What has this researcher done? What has this researcher not done? Now, I just want to combine the two by saying that, for example, if one is investigating whether how school-going children get into drug addiction, a researcher may use schoolboys only, maybe age 15 to 19. And then in terms of sampling, use simple random sampling. And then use a questionnaire to collect the information. Another researcher wants to find out a similar question, but targeting the parents. At that point, you notice that by reading the previous literature on school-going children, one will see that that researcher did not target the parents. And then in terms of the sampling procedure, it will be necessary, or it may be necessary to use a different sampling technique in order to get the sample for that study. And also in terms of the instrument to be used to collect the information, whereas a previous researcher may have used a questionnaire, it may be necessary to use a focus group discussion with parents. So then there are no special tenets of identifying knowledge gaps. We're just saying that look at what you want to do, look at what others have done through the literature study, identify the things you want to do which those others have not done. Now, then the question of what about if there are more? I have already given an illustration where there could be more research gaps. That would also help justify the methodology that one wants to use in one study, so that one is not just targeting the population alone or the practicability, but also one wants to impact on the methodology just to make a contribution to the method being used. So there's no harm in identifying more than one gap. In fact, it shows a sense of thorough reading. Thank you. Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Very well put. Yeah, it is a measure of your level of indulgence and commitment in your area of study. Thank you. Harriet, and then Juliet, and then you'll allow me to move on. I want to run away from the gaps. I want to share my thoughts on how we do this chapter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for those insights in terms of literature review. Just in as much as you haven't touched on theoretical gaps, but supposing you identify from your literature review that there is a lack of theoretical rigor, my question is, would meta-theorization be considered a contribution?
Agreed. Again, just what Prof has just said, your depth of engagement. It will be a measure of your depth, your enthusiasm, your commitment. By the way, I'm tempted, I was tempted to show this theoretical gap, but because of time, I'll do it in the Masters in Education, Leadership and Policy class tomorrow evening. So those of you who will have some time, I'll be going into these gaps in more detail with that class, because they're already trying to write the chapter 2. Otieno?
Yes, Prof. Thank you so much. Good evening. I have a question here, Prof. Maybe not so, okay, in line with the thesis. I just need help here. When I sent my work part of chapter 1 for the review, you gave me a response here on my topic, something written systemic limitation. Besides the topic, I've been trying to think what this really means. I just needed guidance under the topic systemic limitations.
Okay, so we'll do that tomorrow in the smaller group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to run away and just broadly recap what I was trying to do the other weekend, and we were short of power, and it was very frustrating. And I just want to, I'm not going through this because I want to start on the actual writing of the literature review, but creating the literature review, we should note that creating an excellent literature review involves the following components: identifying and summarizing relevant research. And this, the supervisors who are on this platform, please insist that students actually engage and summarize relevant research and begin to ask them, what is the research gap in this article you have just given me? Ask them about the methodology. Ask them about sampling. Ask them about what were the main objectives in the study and how do you think they relate to the study we want to help you develop. So identifying and summarizing relevant research, and then synthesizing the findings. Like I've shown you, you synthesize, you do a summary, you show the gaps. And then you are able to, and of course, there are citations. I wasn't giving citations now, but we'll give them later, the authors and so on. And then clearly highlighting the gaps in the literature. And I just want to show you how to amplify these research gaps. And so the takeaway from today's seminar is that we read these articles because we are searching for a gap. And once we have established the gap, we will now do the study to, let me say, overcome that gap or that limitation. Let me give you an example, the impact of social media on adolescent mental health. So you would say something like this: recent years have seen a surge in research on the impact of social media on adolescent mental health. And this review, it is a literature review, synthesizes findings from various studies to identify consistent patterns and gaps in the literature. And this can be said of all our areas of endeavor. You are going to synthesize the findings from various studies to identify consistent patterns and gaps. So look at this summary of the research. I'm just giving you an example. The positive impacts, several studies, e.g. Smith et al., 2018, Lee and Cho, 2019, have highlighted the positive aspects of social media, such as enhanced social connections and access to support networks. Negative impacts. Conversely, research by Twenge et al. 2017 and Lin et al. 2016 points to negative effects, including increased anxiety, depression, and cyberbullying. Note the impact of social media on adolescent mental health. So what is this thing? We have seen a surge in research on the impact of social media on adolescent health. So we are synthesizing these findings from various studies to identify consistent patterns and gaps. So these are the patterns: positive impacts and negative impacts. And then mixed outcomes. Some studies, like those of Valkenberg and Peter, suggest that the impact of social media varies significantly depending on individual differences and usage patterns. What are we doing? What are we doing in this? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? We are reviewing, but the purpose is this one: synthesizes findings. You synthesize the findings and you identify consistent patterns and gaps. That's what you are doing. And you can see this is what we are doing. We have synthesized what each of those study, where it is it in positive impacts or negative impacts or mixed outcomes. Identification of gaps. The longitudinal data. While many studies provide cross-sectional data, there is lack of longitudinal research exploring the long-term effects of social media on mental health. Diverse populations. Most populations are focused on Western populations, in other words, the North, leading to a gap in understanding how these impacts vary across cultural contexts. You see, you have already found a space for yourself. You have already found a space for yourself. You are now going to say these studies were in the North, my study will be in the South. And you'll be chasing almost the same attributes that they were chasing, but within a different cultural context.
Yeah.
Mechanisms of impact. There is need for more research into the specific mechanisms through which social media affects mental health, such as the role of sleep disruption or social comparison. I have found gaps for my study from this literature, from these articles. I find this very interesting. I find this extremely interesting. These specific mechanisms, one would do a study there, such as the role of sleep disruption and social comparison. So, conclusion, future research should prioritize longitudinal designs and include more diverse populations to fully understand the complex relationship between social media and adolescent mental health. Additionally, exploring the underlying mechanisms will be crucial for developing targeted interventions. Remember, we are not doing research for the sake of research. We want to intervene. We want to find a solution. So this should give you a bird's view of why you are reading that article. Why you're reading that article. Let me give example 2. The role of artificial intelligence in healthcare. Suppose that is the topic. If you come down here, the introduction, you talk about artificial intelligence and say is transforming healthcare, where applications ranging from diagnostics to personalized medicine, with applications, ranging from diagnostics to personalized medicine. This literature review aims to synthesize current research and identify areas where further investigation is needed. So in the introduction of your chapter 2, tell us about the phenomenon in question and tell us where you are going with it. What is it that you want to do? Then, summary of the research, diagnostics. AI has shown promise in improving diagnostic accuracy, particularly in imaging. That is Esteva et al. 2017 and Rajpukar et al. 2018. Treatment personalization. Studies like Obmeyer and Emmanuel 2016 have demonstrated AI's potential to tailor treatments to individual patients based on vast databases. And then operational efficiency research by Davenport and Kalakota 2019 highlights artificial intelligence role in optimizing hospital operations, reducing costs, and improving patient outcomes. You have read the literature, you are able to summarize, and these will be the subtopics in your literature review if you are doing this topic. What are the gaps? Ethical consideration. There is limited research addressing the ethical implications of artificial intelligence in healthcare, including issues of bias, transparency, and patient consent. Integration challenges. Studies often overlook the practical challenges of integrating AI, artificial intelligence, into existing healthcare systems, such as interoperability with current technologies and workflows. So there are people who don't understand AI, and that would be a challenge of integration. That's a gap, particularly in the third world. And then regulatory frameworks. The regulatory landscape for AI in healthcare remains underdeveloped, with few studies providing clear guidelines for policymakers. So there's an issue around policymaking here in this AI area. I hope you're seeing how that chapter 2 will be, depending on the topic that you will opt for. Conclusion: to fully realize the benefits of AI in healthcare, future research must address ethical considerations, integration challenges, and the development of robust regulatory frameworks in terms of policy. And this will ensure that AI technologies are implemented safely and effectively. Example 3, I'm running through this very fast. climate change and agriculture. We know climate change poses significant challenges to agriculture, affecting crop yields, livestock, and food security. This literature review consolidates existing research to highlight consistent findings and identify knowledge gaps. So this one has already told us this is a knowledge gap issue. Summary, impact on crop yields, studies by Laban et al. 2008 and Schlenker and Roberts 2009 document the negative effects of rising temperatures and changing precipitation patterns on crop yields. Livestock productivity, research by Nardon et al. 2010 and Thornton et al. 2014 indicates that climate change impacts livestock through heat stress and altered feed availability. Adaptation strategies, various adaptation strategies such as the development of drought-resistant crops and improved irrigation techniques have been proposed. Howden et al. 2007 and Nelson et al. 2014. And then the gaps. For example, these are just examples to open your mind on how you're going to construct your chapter 2. Region variability. There's need for more region-specific studies to understand the localized impacts of climate change on agriculture. Socioeconomic factors, few studies consider the socioeconomic factors that influence farmers' ability to adapt to climate change, such as access to resources and technology. And then, long-term projections. Most research focuses on short-term impacts with a gap in long-term projections that consider future climate scenarios and technological advancement. Conclusion. We are told future research should emphasize region-specific studies and incorporate socioeconomic factors to develop comprehensive adaptation strategies, and additionally, long-term projections are essential for preparing the agriculture sector for future climate conditions. I just picked that as a topic and showed you how the literature review chapter should go before I actually pick a study and we walk through it with you. So in conclusion, in these studies, each literature review follows a structured format. Ladies and gentlemen, it begins with an introduction. That one. First thing, introduction. Summarizes existing research. Summarizes existing research. Identifies specific gaps. And it is specific, so you must tell us which is your gap. And then concludes with the recommendations for future research. So we are trying to tell you we must put ourselves in a situation where everybody's literature review chapter should have this format. And so when you are summarizing existing research, you go back to your objectives, to your research questions, and you do literature around those objectives. And then you bring out the gap and tell us why your study wants to fill that gap. So this approach not only provides a comprehensive overview of the current state of knowledge, but also clearly outlines where further investigation is needed, thereby amplifying the identified gaps. This is what I expect in a snapshot your literature review chapter to look like. And now I want to go into a specific example of a study from my book, which I would like us to use as a model. And you can critique it, you can ask so many questions around it, but essentially, this is what we expect of a literature review. So that's part one. Part two, I don't know whether people know mind maps. mind maps. I don't know whether people are aware of mind maps. Mind maps. And even as I am doing this, I want to give you 2-3 minutes to look at this. Caro or Wanyonyi, the co-host, is it showing?
Yes, it's showing, Prof.
Yeah, so can you just reflect on that for 1 minute?
Yeah. Meanwhile, again, as I said, our colleagues, feel free to chip in, whether from DASA or any other university, because these are all our PhD or postgraduate students undertaking programs in various areas. Yeah, feel free to contribute. Mind maps. I know the concept of mind map actually it literally usually really helps, where you have your concept in the middle here, and then you have factors that are going to contribute to it. For example, if you have the research methodology, and you can still have here the word literature review, you can write here chapter 1, but what is it going to contribute? You see, what contributes to research methodology are so many things. There's data research methodology has to do with data collection, with research method, with data analysis, content sampling. So you look at it from a different perspective, then that's how you write this particular concept. Because when you write the concept very well, now you realize how easy it is actually, because these are just methods. When we talk about research design, and if it is design, what is it? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it mixed method? If you talk about data analysis, then what is it? Is it content analysis, statistical analysis, thematic analysis? Validity and reliability of your research methodology, look at how it opens up, several ways of addressing your write-up of, say, for example, chapter 3. And others can also contribute to me.
Hello.
Yes.
Dr. Caro, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay.
This is Alvin.
Yes, Mwabu. That's Mwabu?
Yes.
Yes, Mwabu.
Even before the professor picks up from where he left.
Yeah.
In simple terms, what is the role of research methodology in research?
Research methodology in what is the role of research methodology in research?
Yes.
Wow.
That's an interesting one. Research methodology, and I don't know whether I'll be able to pick that slide, but I'll look for it. Research methodology is the blueprint, right from conceptualization to completion of your study. Methodology. It is the continuum from identifying your philosophical underpinnings, and then your assumptions, and then your methods, and into report writing and submission. That whole continuum is research methodology. This is a mind map. And what I wanted the students to note is that there are certain aspects that have not been captured on this mind map, but hidden within. So this is, you can say the research design and the data collection. This is our chapter 3. Data analysis, statistical analysis, all that moving forward is our chapter 4. Reliability, validity is still a part of our chapter 3. And this sampling is in our chapter 3. So I have picked research methodology from chapter 3 to chapter 4 is what I've presented here. I have not covered chapter 1 and chapter 2. So what I was saying is this: when you are doing research, can you please carry a mind map and ask yourself, how am I? What is my understanding of the research design? Which one am I going with? Am I going mixed methods, qualitative or quantitative? How will I do my data collection? And even before data collection, how will I do my sampling? And how do I ensure reliability, both external and internal, and the validity of my instruments and the data I'm collecting? How about the data analysis? From your course in research methods, are you confident? Are you confident with the data analysis approach that you're going to use? So this you should be able to populate this as you move along, and it should always be in your mind. Don't do research methods. Don't write your proposal without a mind map all the time. A fixated mind map, but or a fluid mind map, but you must have a mind map to know the magnitude of the undertaking. That's why I'm showing this. But I would like the class to allow me to talk about let me stop sharing. Talk about an actual example, and I want us to take time on this until we are confident of what it is that is required of us. Caro, is this showing writing your dissertation, chapter 2?
Yeah, it is. It's just you can minimize a little so that it fits in the screen.
Okay.
Then you can, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a Word
Yes,
document.
Prof.
Can't do much. And I really want to be dogmatic here. And allow me to introduce this, and then we shall be reading through this as we go along. And this is from my book, this is from the Research Methods book. In this section, you first, you who is writing the literature review, you first remind your readers about the problem and the purpose of the study. That is your introduction. Just a minute, let's get this on. So in this section, you first remind your readers about the problem and the purpose of the study. That is introduction and overview. We have just said there's an introduction. Then you share what should be expected in this literature review chapter. What am I expecting to see? Highlighting the main sections and or topics you'll be writing about in this chapter. By the way, some of these things sound very obvious. They are not. So first of all, you remind your readers about the problem and purpose of the study. That is the first thing you do. Problem and purpose of the study. Then you share what should be expected. What is expected in the literature review chapter? What am I going to encounter? Those subtopics that we talked about in a short while ago, the ones I've been showing you, showing the gaps, up to the gaps. So you must be able to tell us what is it that we expect in the chapter. And when I say, what do I expect? You highlight the main sections and topics you'll be writing about. The main points and directions. These are the main key points that the master's and doctoral researcher should consider when developing the overview section of chapter 2. So I'm repeating. State the research problem or gap, state the purpose of the study, provide an overview of what you plan to discuss in this chapter. So this is very important. That is very important. And it must come from you. It must come from you. This one. What am I saying? I'm saying, I don't want you to keep asking yourself, what will I write in my chapter 2? I have said there's introduction and overview. And the overview section of this chapter will have all these things. Now, let me give you an example of an overview. This is from the book. And here, we are talking, I've picked one of my favorite things nowadays is ChatGPT. So this is what I would write, for example, in the overview of the chapter. Although there have been conservations, and that is deliberate, although there have been conservations within the academic community about the use of ChatGPT, an artificial intelligence chatbot, there was limited empirical evidence in support of how university faculty and graduate students view the utilization of this artificial intelligence tool and the concerns they have about it. I'm quoting Agostino, 2023. The purpose of this study, remember, we were told to bring in the purpose of this study, was to examine concerns they have about, the purpose of this study was to examine how ChatGPT can be used in the academic world and explore concerns associated with adapting this artificial intelligence chatbot. In this chapter, I review relevant literature in relation to the topic of ChatGPT adaptation, use, and concerns within the academic field. I started this review by describing where and how the literature was assessed, and after describing the literature search strategies, detailed information about the conceptual framework and concepts related to ChatGPT adoption and utilization literature were reviewed. Of course, in our format at Daystar, you don't use the first person. So you're not going to say, where I've said in this chapter, I reviewed, no. In this chapter, relevant literature was reviewed in relation to the topic of ChatGPT adaptation, use, and concerns within the academic field. A review, I started, the review was done by describing where and how the literature was assessed. And after describing the literature search strategies, detailed information about the conceptual framework and the concepts related to ChatGPT adoption and utilization literature were reviewed. Ladies and gentlemen, what am I saying? I'm saying this. Don't, and I'm asking my colleague supervisors, don't tell students, go and write chapter 2 without telling them what will it consist of. There is an overview, and I've told you what the overview should carry here. And then there's an introduction I'm bringing in, and I would like us to discuss this. There's a discussion where I say I started this review by describing where and how literature was assessed. This is not in our graduate handbook, this one. But I find it of value that a good researcher will tell us, this is where I went to get the literature. Was it Emerald database? Was it ERIC? Was it the Library of Congress? Can you tell us which were your main databases? So after describing the literature search strategies, you then give detailed information about the conceptual framework and concepts related to ChatGPT adoption and utilization literature. So this is what I expect out of you. This is what I expect out of you. I would like to emphasize that there is no way you are going to write a smart literature review chapter if you don't internalize what I have just said. So after that, ChatGPT, I would like to say something in my overview, in my introduction. I want to say something about ChatGPT. So I would like to say something, and that's something I will write it still in my overview. And I don't know what you are studying. If you are studying mental health, we will want you to say something about mental health very briefly in the overview here. So I would like to ask Otieno, Juliet, to read for us notes about ChatGPT.
Okay, Prof, thank you. Notes about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is an artificial intelligence-powered chat system that is capable of responding to questions you ask or command or prompt you give. Atlas 2023. This chatbot, developed by OpenAI, https openai.com, has been trained on a huge amount of information gathered from the internet. If an appropriate prompt is given, ChatGPT can provide useful information, dramatically cutting the amount of time spent in getting similar information from conventional means. As Al-Shatter 2022 puts it, it is trained on a large data set of human conversations and can generate appropriate responses to questions and prompts given by users. It can also generate complete conversations on its own, making it a powerful tool for NLP research. Page 2.
Yes. I don't worry about NLP research will give you the meaning of the acronym, but I'm saying this. Anybody reading my chapter 2, this overview, has gotten the research problem or gap, has seen the purpose of the study, and I have given a plan of what I'm going to discuss in the chapter. Yes, so this is what I expect based on your topic. This is what I would like to see in the overview chapter. That's what I'm saying. Dr. Wanyonyi.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. While we're on that section of the overview, I'd be keen to know your views on what is referred to as grey literature. And I really like the points that you're putting forward about noting in the overview how that literature or where it was accessed. So there's been an issue where, for instance, our students, consult grey literature. And by that, I mean literature that does not appear in indexing or databases. It's not peer reviewed. It's actually published in websites. It's credible research for some reason. And so what is the place of this grey literature? And is that also a possibility for that to be noted under the overview section?
Yeah, I would like that. And I would like my students, or rather these students will soon have PhDs and become professors. So they are our colleagues, just age difference. I would like them to begin to argue like researchers. If you get a paper written by Professor Wekesa in a conference, but it was not published, but that paper carries information that supports what you want to give in your research, then you should indicate that. So in your overview, you should be saying where grey literature, and now grey literature is something very high on the agenda in research area, is used, you will belabor to provide the source and ascertain to the credibility of that literature. So that's a good point. Now, I want us to move a little faster. And this is controversial. And I would like us to discuss this, my colleagues particularly. Please help me, because it's going to cause a lot of argument, even in defenses. I would like us to call upon, I don't know whether, I'm just picking names. Is somebody called Marlin? Not here. Who is this? Marlin or Fred Obondo? Are you anywhere near?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please help us. Read us this section. Read us. We are being very careful, and I don't want to rush to this section. Yes.
Just a second. Okay. Literature search and selection. The literature search strategy section is where you present how and where you searched for literature related to your topic and selected relevant ones for review. There are three main reasons why this section is very important. Firstly, as part of promoting the transparency of the study, you are expected to share the strategies you use to search for appropriate literature for review. Secondly, it is a way of educating your readers in the techniques used to search and select the right literature for your study. And lastly, sharing how you got the literature you reviewed helps future researchers to replicate what you did if need be.
Yes, thank you. Very good reading. Now, just carry on, finish for me this, then somebody else will pick it up. We are going through this meticulously because we want to write the strongest chapters in literature in this country.
Okay,
go on, yes.
Okay, so main points and directions. These are the main key points that the master's doctoral researcher should consider when writing the literature search and selection. Selection section in chapter 2. 1, describe the database you use to search for literature related to your topic. 2, state the search terms you need to search for the literature. 3, share the criteria you used to select relevant literature for review.
Yeah, that is very critical. That is very critical, and we are lifting you to another pedestal. I don't want you to be a blind researcher. I want you to be a researcher who is confident about what they're doing, but also this is how you'll avoid. This is how you'll avoid accusations of plagiarism, etc. That's how you'll avoid them. So I would like another reader, and please bear with me for taking you back to your high school days of reading in class. But we are trying to learn this and learn it well. So I would like somebody to, I want to give an example of what I wrote here. And where I say I, this is a book, you are not going to say I. At the time that the literature was being reviewed, or the search and review of literature, so you don't use I, but let it stand there. Just read it as it is. Who is courageous?
I'll read it.
Okay. Who is
This
that?
is Lydia Winder.
Yeah, Winder, please take it up from there.
So example 20.2, literature search and selection. At the time that I was searching for literature to review, ChatGPT had been released for public use for about 3 months. Due to this, there was a few databases that had literature relevant to my topic. I used the Sage Journal and ERIC databases to get access to ChatGPT. Besides, the Google Scholar search engine for literature, including their sources. The following terms were used to access articles: ChatGPT, impact on education, ChatGPT and research, and ChatGPT and education. To be selected as part of the review, the literature should touch on one of the following areas.
Yes.
Should I continue?
No, but I want us to go back here. I said, due to this, there were a few databases that had literature relevant to my topic or relevant to the topic. So the researcher used the Sage Journal and ERIC databases to get access to ChatGPT related literature. And besides, the Google Scholar search engine was used to search for literature, including their sources. So you must tell us, where did you go to search for your literature material? But also important, you must have the search terms. So the following terms were used to access the articles, and they are as listed above. And then we are saying here, to be selected as part of the review, the literature should touch on one of the following. So there is exclusion and inclusion. So carry on from there.
So roles of ChatGPT in promoting academic work, functions of ChatGPT, meaning of ChatGPT, limitations of ChatGPT, benefits of ChatGPT, ethical issues related to ChatGPT. In
Yes.
addition, can I continue or I pause there?
No, I'm saying pause. So these were the search terms that were used. And by the way, where did this come from? It's after I have searched these databases, I began to see a lot of these things coming through. Functions, meaning, limitations, benefits, ethical issues. And these now will be subtopics in my chapter 2 of literature review. Carry on.
In addition, I searched for literature that focused on studying or discussing the diffusion of innovation theory. The diffusion of innovations was the theory I used to develop the conceptual theoretical framework for this study. The terms I used to search for literature related to this theory were Rogers, diffusion of innovations and technology, and diffusions of technology. Utilizing these search strategies helps in getting access to relevant literature to review.
Very good reading. Thank you. Where I come from, I was telling some people, and I'm telling you, I would be asking, I would not say, do you understand what I'm trying to say? I would say, is this matter reaching you? I'm asking the class, and I don't want answers. Is it reaching you? Are you seeing the value of getting into the right search databases and having the key terms for the review? And you can see, where did this person get this innovation theory of diffusion? Of course, they got them from the literature. The articles they read, the theories began to come up. The diffusion of innovations was the theory I used to develop the conceptual theoretical framework. It didn't pluck it from somewhere. It came from the studies around this ChatGPT, which is an innovation, which is relates to diffusion and technology, and also relates on who will partake of it, the early adapters up to the laggards. So all that came up. I would like us to bear with me, because I would like us to, now that we have encountered the conceptual framework, I would like us to go through it as we close today's class, this seminar 2, so that people now begin to go and say, how will my chapter 2 look like? From what Prof did with us, how will my chapter 2 look like? So the big question is, we have now known how to search. You pick search terms that relate around your topic, and then you go to the right databases. And our library is open for you, to guide you, to help you. Then you can see very quickly the conceptual theoretical framework has arrived on our hands. Can somebody pick it up for me from there?
Can I read?
Yes, Zipporah, thank you.
Yeah, conceptual theoretical framework. The conceptual theoretical framework reflects a description of the theory, model, or concepts that inform your study. The framework for your study can be written in chapter 1. However, some institutions or dissertation chairs, supervisors may ask you to expand what was written in chapter 1 by sharing and synthesizing academic authors and researchers' views on the features, components, strengths, weaknesses, and or assumptions about the theory, model of concepts you have selected for your study. In addition, you are expected to review how the selected theory, models, or concepts have been used by researchers if studies related to your framework have been done.
Pause. Now, you see, this theoretical and conceptual framework, somebody asked us a question. These are tied at the hip. They are tied at the hip. And I am giving you the components I would like to see in your conceptual and theoretical framework before you write me your literature review. I'm also being courageous to tell you, and I've told people, in our graduate's handbook, I'm told they have moved the conceptual and theoretical framework to chapter 2. I have no problem. But it is not a contradiction if in chapter 1, in one page, I can talk about the conceptual and theoretical framework and show the conceptual framework. Then when I come to chapter 2, I expand the dancing. There's no harm. And that doesn't negate the graduate handbook, or that doesn't make your study invalid. Carry on, Sipora.
Main points and directions. These are the main key points that the master's or doctoral researchers should consider when writing the conceptual theoretical framework section in chapter 2. State the theory, model, or concepts used in the development of the framework. 1. Describe the originators of the theory, model, or concepts. 2. Describe the characteristics of the theory, model, or concepts. 3. Present the components of the theory or model. 4. Describe the views and assertions of scholars and researchers in relation to the theory, model, or concepts. And 5. Describe the studies done, if any, that utilize the theory, model, or concepts.
Pause. Thank you. Very good reading. I'm very happy about that. Now, I am not a supervisor who will tell you, go and write your theoretical framework. Or rather, Daystar is not a university that tells you, go and write the theoretical framework. We are telling you that state the theory and model or concept used in the development of the theoretical framework. We are saying, and this is what we are saying, this is what you will do. You will describe the originator or originators of the theory, model, or concepts. You describe the characteristics. You present the components of the theory or model. You describe the views and assertions of scholars and researchers about this model, theory, or concept, and you describe the studies done that utilize the theory, model, or concept. That's why I told you, some of you can go for a theoretical gap. You might want to argue about the theories that were used here. But more importantly, when I read your chapter 2 now, I don't want to see any nervousness because you have already been told how this will be constructed. So I want us to look at an example, and then we shall close from there. We shall not go to the literature review. We shall close with the example, and I think we'll stop we'll not get into the details. We'll stop here. So I want to just look at what we have written about the conceptual and theoretical framework. Somebody pick it up.
Let me pick it up. The theory selected to inform this study was the diffusion of innovations, Deering and Cox 2018. This theory was developed by Rogers 2003. The diffusion of innovation theory explains how innovations are adopted and used by people over time. In other words, the theory evolves around how new technologies are accepted and utilized over time, Sahin 2006. Rogers' diffusion of innovations theory is the most appropriate for investigating the adoption of technology in higher education and educational environments, Sahin 2006, page 14. Similarly, the theory best informed this study because it focused on exploring the diffusion process of ChatGPT within the academic world, examining the use of these AI chatbot among the university faculty and graduate students. Diffusion is how the information about and utilization of an innovation moves the innovators of a technology to the end users. Wedgenat 2002.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, all I have done is describe the originators of the theory. And originators, you see them, Daring and Cox and Rogers. I have talked about the characteristics of the theory, model, and concepts. If you read down, the theory evolves around how new technologies are accepted and utilized over time. I've talked about the present components of the theory, then describe the views and assertions of scholars, then describe the studies done. That is further down when we talk about diffusion, when we talk about innovation, when we talk about characteristics of innovators, and then we come to this famous table of innovators, early adapters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. Then we'll come to the environment context, and then we now go proper into the literature. And all I'm doing, I want to emphasize, all I'm doing is this. All I'm doing is this. State the research problem, state the purpose, provide an overview of what you plan to discuss in that literature review. So that's all I'm doing. And after I've done the search, I will describe the databases used, I'll state the search terms used, I'll share the criteria used to select the relevant literature. And then you now go to the role of ChatGPT in promoting academic work, and you jump into the conceptual and theoretical framework, which you then describe. Then after that, after you've done the conceptual, theoretical framework, we are stopping here for tonight, but tomorrow, those who can join in the evening will push to diffusion, will still go through the theoretical and conceptual framework, and then after I finish that, we can now come to the literature review and how to construct it. And we are doing this in view of the topic ChatGPT, but you're not doing ChatGPT. You have your own topic, which you'll be dealing with. So we'll go through the literature, we'll give you an example of the literature, and you can see where I'm talking of role and functions of GPT, limitations of ChatGPT, and then go on and so on and summarize that chapter. I hope, and this is in colloquial English, I hope what I'm saying is reaching you. Yeah. So that's where I want to stop tonight with the seminar. I don't want to push too hard. I want us to really grasp how to write a very robust chapter 2, original chapter 2. So this is actually what I would expect. Let me stop sharing this and show you this. If I was doing this research, if from my book, this is the literature review on chat. Oh, sorry. I'm not sharing yet. This is the mind map. If I was doing chat literature review, chat GPT chart literature review. This is what I would have in my mind. Nataka mutafakari kwa hii in your own ways. Look at that. This is my literature review. That will be my literature review. I am trying to encourage you to always do mind maps, scribble, or develop a mind map like this always. It helps clarity. It also tells you, but you haven't covered this. You haven't done the background. You haven't done the origin, the development, the impact. Research, innovation, future direction, challenges in education, applications, entertainment, customer service, and so on. You haven't done this, so you have to do it. The next 10 minutes is open for discussion. Any views, any questions, any comments on this? Very interesting stuff. I wish I was in your shoes. I wish I was doing my PhD now. I'd write a masterpiece. Harriet, and then Atieno.
Thank you so much. That's quite interesting, eh?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in terms of this theory development. You've talked about how you need to describe, the sources and how these theories have been used. But I want to imagine that at one point you need to contextualize them to your specific area of research. So I don't know how that would flow. Like, is it okay for me just to check the theories, of course, with their basic understanding and contextualize immediately, or I need to first of all go through the description process and then try to contextualize it? Because I think it would be insufficient just to use a theory and talk about, how it has been used.
No. Far from that. Far from that. Because from what I've just told you, when you're doing the theory, you will let me see. We have said you are trying to, what am I trying to do? You are trying to sit in this theory. By the way, you're trying to sit in this theory. So you are supposed to present, by the time you present components of the theory and model, and then number 4, and maybe let me share this, because good question, by the way, very good question. Let me share this if I can manage before time goes out. And we can't afford to be in a hurry on this one. No, can't. One of my biggest achievements as a supervisor is when I finish with my students in chapter 2, they come back. They remember me for chapter 2, by the way. It is so fulfilling because that's what makes you a researcher. Look, when you present the components of the theory, then describe the views and assertions of scholars and researchers in relation to the theory, model, and concepts. You will not be talking about just researchers and scholars. You'll also be talking about your study and how it fits in. Are you getting? When you are describing the views and assertions, it will be like your chapter 4, the discussion. You are now able to say, in this study that I'm going to do, this is how my study sits in this model. So it's not just describing these things independent of your study. Good question.
Thank you.
Yes. Who was next? Somebody.
It's me, Prof. Lydia.
Lydia, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the informative session. I wanted to ask, so when you're doing theoretical framework, so how many theories? Is there a minimum or maximum number of theories that we can use? What would you advise given your experience?
Yeah, I think Prof. Okesa must be wiggling in his seat and saying, but I thought I answered this one. It just depends on the kind of research. You see, if you're doing multidisciplinary research, like you're doing psychology and communication, or psychology and education, obviously you're going to tie up one or two theories. So it depends, but more importantly, you'll be filled with this knowledge, you'll be replenished with this knowledge if you do adequate literature review. So I can't tell you 1, 2, but I would be nervous for you to continue adding theories. Because you know why? You are actually expanding the variables of the study, and therefore your objectives and research questions, the sub-items for the questionnaires, you'll end up with a very big tool. So I'll be very careful. I'll be very careful, and I want to leave that to you and your supervisor. Next. Wanyonyi, and then Frederick Ogore.
All right, thank you, Prof. I just wanted to make a quick comment regarding the use of first person, as when you are talking about the overview section, where you're describing or telling the reader how you accessed or where you access the literature. I think when you look at APA 7 stylistics, it actually recommends the use of first person.
I know.
Because it is better to reduce ambiguity, because there's no sense, for example, according to APA, in giving human attributes to the work. So when you're describing the steps of research, the steps that you took in research, it is better to use first person as opposed to anthropomorphizing the work itself. Yes. So I think as Daystar University, we need to take a stand and align ourselves more with APA 7, which is what we subscribe to.
Yeah, thank you. You see, you have made me strong, because I was fearing they would say this one is old-fashioned. I mean, not old-fashioned. This one is bringing things that we don't adhere to. But I find it very exact.
Yes.
And very committal. So I'm glad. I said I was bringing this to cause debate.
So maybe we could even just go back to the handbook and see whether we can be a little bit flexible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you so much. Wow, this is nice. Fred Ogore?
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think to me, this is my weekend. This is great, especially I was working on something today and I was really trying to navigate, but I think my take home that has stopped the list is the mind map, because this will give me such a great direction. I was a little bit stuck, to be honest, and I'm glad that I joined this session. I think that is my breakthrough, if I can call it. But number 2, you've answered. I was to ask on multidisciplinary, especially if you are trying to employ theories. You've already answered, but I would ask in terms of, is there a need to justify some theory? Because some theories have versions, but sometimes your study is based on an earlier theory that you feel underpins your study. So is there a need to justify a theory in terms of articulating its application? Or is there a need to also discuss its weakness in terms of, because some theories have particular weakness in terms of their limit? Is there a need? And then lastly, what could be the progression in terms of the progression, because you're using many theories, what would be the sequence of application? I hope I'm clear.
I think with theories, I would use chronology in terms of my objectives or research questions. Yes, cause debate around the theory, but Ogore, are you chasing a theoretical gap? If you are not chasing a theoretical gap, don't overload your system. If you are doing a theoretical gap, then argue. In fact, tomorrow's seminar, I'll deal with the remaining gaps. I think it's necessary to give illustrations. So yes, and don't hesitate. And with your supervisor, please have open minds, liberal minds. Become obsessed. Like let me confess. I am so obsessed in ensuring that I give all that I have to my students in data, in masters and PhD, so that they become better than me. They become better for tomorrow. So if you have the passion and the obsession, all these questions we are talking about, we will assemble our thoughts at the end of your thesis, and you say, my God, this was a journey. Just like for me, teaching these classes is a journey. How I taught in Moi University is not how I'm teaching now. I am learning, I am evolving, I am getting more engaged. Even just sitting down, I spent hours and hours looking for examples, because I kept on asking myself, when I tell my students there are gaps, which are these gaps? Do they know them? Can I shine some light on the gaps so that when they're reading the literature, they're able to see them? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Very good. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure the last 3 hours. I would want to suggest that those of us who can, this is not compulsory, this is a seminar, to come in tomorrow. We finished this literature review chapter, and now I can release most of you to go and try your chapter 2s, and then we'll shepherd them between me and your supervisors. Then, that will enable us, the next weekend we'll be doing chapter 3. Then you are free to finish your proposals. Mbarikiwe sana, and my brother Moni and Wanyonyi and all the faculty. I've seen so many of you. I really, really appreciate, because it's that sense of togetherness that will make us great as a university. Thank you very much. Caro, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for this class session. So next week, Prof, are we going to have seminar, our third seminar on methodology, research methodology, or do you have an idea the seminar you are holding next week?
I want to finish literature review tomorrow.
Yes.
With all this knowledge, I want, and I know you and finance will bash me, but I would like to give the students this template. Maybe I'll use my executive powers. Just this template, so that they have it side by side as they write the chapter 2.
That's okay.
But yes, so that next weekend we can do chapter 3 Saturday, Sunday.
All right, thank you so much. What we can do, you can always just download, and then I can put on this chat box. Everybody who is online can download it on their own. Yes. So that we don't have to, they don't have to send out any email requesting for anything. They can download it themselves real time. Yes. But we are very appreciative. I will definitely want to choose people from different sections to give their feedback. I will begin with people probably, yes, maybe one PhD student, one, and then of course a faculty member in terms of what they felt in terms of this class today, so that we can see what they were able to get. Let me ask, is this Linda Onyuka? She dropped. That was PhD there. Masaki Magak.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah.
All right. That was an ambush, but I appreciate. Professor Laban,
Yes.
I would really like to appreciate that this is very timely. I'd actually indicated on the chart that some of us are actually on the verge of, completing our actually drafting our proposals for our dissertation. And it has been very tough because we always have our own sessions late in the evenings with our cohorts, and we always struggled through these concepts. But I think this seminar is very imperative. It's very beneficial because then with all this kind of information, we are able to go back to what we've been writing and what we've been struggling through, and able to refine and polish through. We normally ask ourselves, where do we get clarity on this information? And Dr. Wanyonyi can attest that every time we come through, we keep on asking, where do we get clarity? And of course, together with the graduate handbook, this information is actually very important for all of us. And I believe, as you've said, please go ahead with your executive power to share with us these templates, because I'm very sure that many of my colleagues who are not available here will really appreciate. And I think the doctoral program is very grateful for all these seminars. I mean, for us, call us anytime. Make it even past 11 p.m. We will be here. We'll be right here because this is very beneficial. Otherwise, if we have an output of a dissertation that is not of high quality, we will have ourselves to blame. But for sure, we are going to integrate all this information in our dissertation. Thank you so much. And tomorrow, we'll be right here.
Okay, thank you. So
all right.
I just want to, Carol, we will release this template tomorrow after we finish the literature review. Huh?
Yeah.
I want to go through all of it, then we release it to them. I'm now interested in the psychology students. I'm doing some work on psychology because I have students now I'm supervising, and statistical analysis. So moving forward, maybe after this, we'll have a seminar for the psychology students, and particularly chapter 3 and chapter 4. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. That then asks us to have Dr. Menecha on your side. Dr. Menecha, I don't know if you're on. Lydia, meanwhile, I see you've already lifted your hand. You can say whatever you want to say, Lydia.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm a visitor. I'm not part of the DSTA family, but I was invited by my prof. I'm a USIU student doing my MA in counseling psychology. And I would like to appreciate that this was very informative. And I've been a very great beneficiary. I didn't want to miss even a second of what Prof was sharing. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's session. Thank you for even opening it up to some of us also. I appreciate.
All right.
Thank you.
Sam Nyabere from outside there. Are we together?
We are together, Prof. Just that I'm on the road, so I might not be happy, but I'm benefiting a lot. Thank you so much for all the support. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Asha, I know you're a faculty, you're also winding up your PhD in South Africa. Is it helpful to just not you as you wind up your PhD, but as also a faculty member?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. And Prof, this is very, very useful, not just to me as a PhD student, but also as a researcher in the law fraternity. And I think such interactions, platforms can really be beneficial, interdisciplinary, especially as we pursue different approaches and perspectives of research. So I think this is very timely, very useful, and very happy and proud to be associated and to be part of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And then finally, definitely, I know people will say we've picked up people from different programs. I think communication, I may not be knowing so much names, but Dr. Wanyonyi, anyone from communication? That was Masaki?
Yeah, that was Masaki. So
Masaki was business.
Yeah.
This is Faith Amisi. This is
Okay.
Faith Amisi,
Yes.
PhD student, Human Resource Management. I just want to appreciate Professor Laban for this session. It's been extremely insightful. And the dream for Daystar to be the epitome of research is happening. This is what brings that to a reality. And I'm extremely grateful. And to the PhD members on the platform, I know we are extremely enlightened, and may God bless Daystar. Thank you, Daktari. We are there. We are there. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and so we have had students. Of course, USI was in. We had Great Lakes, we had Seku, we had Moi. Different. I know people send links to their friends, which is good, caring. And we also had faculty from those different universities that you've mentioned joining us. So we really appreciate for you coming. And for now, utilize this as it is still available and free. I think, Prof, you can imagine if we were, oh, Maseno University was here. Chris, so how is your experience? And student faculty?
It's quite insightful. It's quite insightful.
Yes.
I am a PhD finalist, and I got this through a friend.
Yeah.
I've listened through, and it's very insightful. I am greatly privileged, a professor, to listen to this. And I'll be further and parcel of the subsequent sessions.
Thank you. Okay. Thank
Right.
you,
Thank you so
Carol.
much, Prof, for giving us just kind of, free knowledge. And because if we are to charge everybody here, just even 1,000 today, we would be getting to almost 400K and we'd be richer by that amount of money. But today we are. So while it is free, come on as we finish these seminars, because soon definitely we need to also make sure that he's charged in future so that he doesn't just offer. But I know he's. Prof likes the community. He wants to change the postgraduate education landscape in this country, and it is his wish, and that's why the doors will be open to everybody, including those who are not necessarily from Daystar. Thank you so much. And since Dr. Wanyonyi is here, on behalf of the Directorate for Postgraduate, you can talk and then we can please.
I'm unable to enter the account.
Sorry, I'm looking for them as Dr. Wanyonyi.
Okay.
Who is this? Jean Murungi.
I am unable.
All right, if not, let's give our senior professor here, Professor Dr. Moni Wekesa, and then you can also pray for us as we close. Professor Dr. Moni, yes, and then you also pray for us as we close.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ayiro. I've come across many postgraduate students struggling writing chapter 2 and several other chapters. I think this series of seminars is going to be a very good eye-opener as our students move forward. Thank you, and have the energy, Prof. I like the bread in the background. The eggs look like they are hybrid, not kienyeji, but at least the bread looks very appetizing. Let's pray.
Okay.
Father, we thank you for this time. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you, Lord, for what we have shared. Thank you for what we have learned. I want to pray that as we move forward in different endeavors along the research lines, you be with us. Bless the labors of our hands. Bless each and everyone here represented, together with their families. Lord, open our minds that we may see greater things in the areas of research. We thank you and we pray now that you dismiss us with a blessing. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
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 Amen.